Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Today we are going to talk about a book by Randa Abdel Fateh titled Coming of Age in the War on Terror. The author, Randa Abdel Fateh, is an Australian author, academic, and human rights advocate of Palestinian and Egyptian heritage. Also, her works often explore identity, multiculturalism, and social justice themes. In Coming of Age in the War on Terror, Randa examines the experiences of young Muslims growing up in the aftermath of the 9/11 attacks and how their lives have been shaped by the subsequent war on terror policies and the rise of Islamophobia. The book also delves into the challenges Muslim youth face, including discrimination, stereotyping, surveillance, and the impact on their sense of identity and belonging. So before we begin, let's have a moment with these questions. First, why do you think Islam has always been the victim of hate speech, crimes, and negative perceptions? Second, do you ever think that Islamophobia started before 9/11? And if you're a young person who will watch this video, why do you think sometimes you refuse to admit that you are political while being conscious and fully aware of social issues around you? And I hope this video will help you to answer these questions. I will briefly introduce you about 9/11 incident. The United States was the target of a series of coordinated terrorist attacks on September 11, 2001, colloquially known as 9/11. They were carried out by 19 hijackers affiliated with the terrorist organization Al-Qaeda. The attacks resulted in the death of nearly 3,000 individuals and the destruction of a great deal of property. In addition, the assaults of September 11 had significant local and also global socio-political repercussions. The war on terror, just one of the numerous consequences of the September 11 attacks, is one of the primary topics discussed in the book. And to us, according to the Islamic perspective, the events of September 11 do not represent the teachings or principle of Islamic teaching. Our religion, as Islam promotes compassion, justice, and the sanctity of human life. It is the religion of peace. Firstly, we're going to talk about racism, because one of the issues that the author talked about in this book is racism. 9/11 was somehow considered a watershed moment, and it erased the experiences of minority population of Muslims who have always been invisible. 9/11 rendered the Muslim population visible, and this population became the attention and considered as a problem for people at large. But that also ignored the fact that there was a more significant issue play at rest, especially in this book where we talk about the country Australia, play at rest for Muslims as a minority population. We must make those connections when talking about race to understand that 9/11 was a watershed moment as it launched the global war on terror. But however, it was also an extension of Western imperialism, as they failed to discuss terrorism as a global and state terrorism, but it focused only on the individual itself. For example, in the book, there's a sentence from the author when she interviewed one of the students named Aisha, 17 years old, which is an Afghan and Australian and a Muslim. Aisha said, "People think all Muslims are the same, that we are all terrorists or girls in scarves without a brand. This shows that how a 17 years old Muslim already know the ideology that people think all Muslims are the same. People think Muslims are terrorists despite the race and background. Next, we should talk about the concerns of young people about their political perspective, about their political views and opinion. Since the book highlights the complexities and struggles faced by young Muslims in a post 9/11 world, we must understand. We need to understand their concerns and political viewpoints about certain things, about the social issue going around them. Young people need to have confidence that small and informal acts of protest, small gestures that we post online, we create online, we share online. For example, refusing to admit that we are political is an active refusal that indicates a conscious political act. It shows that the young people withdrawing our attention from consumerism and the media empire. And for me, young people should realize that these small acts that we participate in are just as important politically. And as a young person myself, I can relate to the refusal of that we are actually politically active, especially on social media. I follow a few of Instagram accounts that often share about the social issues in other countries outside Malaysia. But whenever the question of "Are you political?" came to me, I would directly refuse to say yes, despite my conscious and awareness of the social issues going around me. And young people should understand that politics is not limited to the activities, actions, and policies used to gain and hold power in a government or influence it, but also the awareness of social issues happening in that country. The third one, Islamophobia. In this book, it always concerned about Islamophobia, how the young people especially face all the prejudice, discriminations, and hostility from other people that is non-Muslim, and it encompasses a range of negative attitudes. This Islamophobia, it encompasses a range of negative attitudes, stereotypes, and action that target individual or communities, specific communities, but rather I should say Muslim communities that identify and any communities that associated with Islam. And Islamophobia can be manifested in various forms. It generalized stereotypes, discriminates, and prejudice. In this book, it talk about prejudice policy. This book we are talking about focuses on Islamophobia that influences policies, a policy that disproportionately targets Muslims or infringes upon their civil rights in Australia. A Muslim who believes in violence but has no intention of acting on that belief is still regarded as potential extremist. That is the hard truth that Muslims in Australia had to live with. The idea of extremism is collectively projected as meaning that an entire young Muslim community is at risk and needs to be cautioned to look for warning signs, as though there were a checklist of description of potential extremists. This kind of policy squeezes out space and mobility for young people, the Muslim young people, and the projection towards the young Muslim community would then lead to the creation of a community that feels under siege they will change their behavior and modifying their life patterns to avoid getting included in the checklist. For example, in the book, the author talked about how a boy would avoid looking like a Muslim in order for him to feel, in order for the other people to look at him without a fear. And Islamophobia can significantly affect young people on an individual and societal level. It can lead to psychological distress and emotional harm among young Muslims, social exclusion and marginalization of young Muslims. It affects the educational experiences of young Muslims in school settings especially, and it contributes to feeling vulnerable to extremism and strengthens social cohesion and intergroup relation in society. So to conclude, the events of 9/11 had a profound impact on attitudes towards Islam and Muslims, both in the United States and globally. While it is important to note that not all post 9/11 attitudes were negative, there has been a notable increase in Islamophobia and its effects on Muslims. So, Coming of Age in the War on Terror by Randa provides an essential perspective on the social and political implication of the war on terror on Muslim communities, particularly the young generation like us, and encourage discussion about issues of race, religion, and belonging in contemporary society. And according to Islamic views, it is essential to distinguish between acts of terrorism and the religion of Islam itself. Islam is a religion of peace, justice, and compassion. And acts of terrorism, including those carried out under the War on Terror banner, do not represent Islamic teachings or principles at all. And Islam precisely condemns killing innocent civilians regardless of their faith or background. And the term war on terror refers to the global effort to combat terrorism, but it is essential to recognize that this is not a war against Islam or Muslim. The vast majority of Muslims reject and condemn terrorism, and Muslims see acts of terrorism as a perversion of the actual teaching of Islam. And as Muslims, we must always go back to Islam's central religious text, the Holy Quran, while emphasize the sanctity of human life and teach Muslims to uphold justice and promote peace to each other. And we can eventually agree that young Muslims are the target of the extremist ideologies. And this book covers how government policies targeting young Muslims for surveillance and profiling based on their religion or ethnic background can lead to distrust and alienation. It also perpetuates stereotypes and undermines the principles of equality and fairness. And I hope this video helps people to get an insight into the war on terror, into this book. Thank you.